Most people run from the very thing that could set them free. Discipline. The word itself feels cold, doesn't it? Heavy, like a rule, a cage, a burden handed down by someone who forgot how to live. But maybe discipline isn't a punishment. Maybe it's a quiet kind of love, the kind that wakes you up before the world asks anything of you, the kind that says you matter enough to show up for. What if discipline is not what holds you back, but what holds you together? We don't always realize it, but we are building something with every small choice. Every time you choose order over chaos, intention over impulse, stillness over noise, you're making a promise to your future self. And one day that future self will look back and say thank you, not because you were perfect, but because you cared enough to keep going, even on the days it would have been easier not to. The world will tell you to follow your feelings, but feelings are weather. They change. Discipline is climate. It's what makes the whole landscape of your life livable. You don't brush your teeth because you feel inspired. You do it because you respect yourself. You don't build a dream in one grand gesture. You build it in small, boring, beautiful choices. Repeat it until they shine. Ask yourself gently, are you running from discipline, or are you running from the version of yourself who finally shows up with full responsibility? Because that version of you, the one who gets up, the one who says no when it counts, the one who works quietly in the dark with no applause, that version is not suffering. That version is free. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's having the strength to choose what's right, even when no one's watching. We talk about success like it's this prize you chase, but what if success is simply the peace that comes from knowing you've honored your word to yourself? There's a kind of pride that doesn't shout. It lives in a clean room, a kept promise, a finished page, a quiet mind. Discipline is not a punishment, it's permission. Permission to rise, permission to be trusted, permission to become someone even your past self couldn't imagine. You don't need the world to believe in you. You need to believe in the one who shows up, no matter how small the step. That's who you are becoming. Not all at once, but choice by choice. So the next time it feels hard, boring, or invisible, remember this is not the part that holds you back, this is the part that sets you free. We often think of discipline as the fence that keeps us from the joy of living freely. But what if we've misunderstood it entirely? What if discipline isn't a wall but a path? What if it's not the chain but the key? Discipline at its core is not about saying no to life. It's about saying yes to something deeper, to clarity, to order, to a kind of peace that cannot be faked. It is not restriction. It is respect for your own time, your own energy, your own potential. You can feel it when someone walks with discipline. There is a quiet steadiness in them, like a river that knows exactly where it's going, not rushing, not flailing, just flowing, because it has chosen its banks, it has chosen its boundaries, not because it wants to be caged, but because it wants to get somewhere. Discipline is not punishment for wanting more, it is the practice of being ready for more. Think of a garden. Without pruning, without tending, without structure, the wildness would overtake it, and yet, too much structure, too much control, and it loses its soul. Discipline is that middle way. It's the hand that gently guides the growth, not the one that strangles it. When you wake up early, not because you have to, but because you promised yourself a head start. When you choose the quiet work instead of the loud distraction. When you decline what feels good now in favor of what will feel right later. That is not self-denial. That is self-devotion. We live in a world that often confuses freedom with indulgence, but indulgence without intention becomes emptiness. How many times have we chased pleasure, only to find ourselves more tired, more scattered, more lost? Real freedom comes not from escaping limits, but from choosing the right one. There is dignity in discipline. There is beauty in restraint. There is meaning in choosing to live on purpose. Ask yourself, what does it mean to truly care for yourself? Is it treating yourself like a child who wants candy for dinner, or like a soul who deserves strength, clarity, and peace? Discipline is not the voice that scolds. It is the voice that reminds you you're worth the effort. It is not perfection either. It doesn't ask that you never fall. It only asks that when you do, you rise again. Not because anyone's watching, but because you're building a relationship with yourself. And trust, once broken, must be rebuilt with small, steady acts of integrity. And when discipline is grounded in self-respect, it becomes lighter, not easier, but lighter, because it isn't driven by fear or shame. It's powered by love. Love for your future, love for your values, love for the version of you that's quietly waiting on the other side of consistency. Discipline isn't a fight against your nature. It's a reunion with your higher self. So the next time you feel the tug to give up, to go back, to let things slide, pause, not to judge yourself, but to ask, what would someone who truly respects themselves do in this moment? And then do that. You are not being restricted. You are being refined. There's a quiet truth we often overlook, one that doesn't shout, but whispers persistently through the rhythm of our days. You are becoming something, whether or not you mean to. We tend to think of identity as something we're born with, or something we declare in moments of passion, but who you are is not made in a single decision. It's made in repetition, in what you do when the world isn't looking, in the choices so small they feel invisible, yet they carve the shape of your character, like water carving stone. What you do daily becomes who you are permanently. We imagine transformation as a lightning strike, a sudden brilliant moment of change, but in truth, becoming is quieter than that. It's in the way you spend your mornings. It's in whether or not you keep your word to yourself. It's in how you treat your time, your body, your responsibilities, your distractions. Ask yourself, what am I rehearsing every day? Because you are rehearsing something. If you rehearse patience, you become more patient. If you rehearse procrastination, you become more avoidant. If you rehearse gratitude, it will start to rise on its own, even on hard days. And if you rehearse resentment, it will build a home in your heart, even when joy tries to visit. It doesn't matter what you intend, it matters what you repeat. And this is both the most terrifying and the most liberating truth of all, because it means you are never stuck, but it also means you are never free from responsibility. Habits are not just things we do, they are pathways in the mind, grooves in the soul, and over time they become our default settings, our home base. They shape not just our outcomes, but our out. Think of a sculptor working with marble. Each swing of the chisel doesn't reveal the form, but taken together, one after another, day after day, the shape begins to emerge, slowly, clearly, undeniably. Your daily choices are the chisel, your life is the sculpture, and your future self is what's taking shape. This isn't about perfection, it's not about grinding endlessly, or becoming someone who checks all the boxes. It's about noticing, with honesty and compassion, the patterns we're living, and asking gently, are these patterns building the kind of life I want to inhabit? It's not the occasional great decision that defines you, it's the consistent small ones, the ones that feel unimportant, but aren't. The way you end your day, the way you speak to yourself, when no one else can hear, the way you choose your attention, your energy, your presence. These are the brushstrokes, and they will paint your life. So often we wait for motivation to strike before we act. But what if it's the other way around? What if action, repeated, is what creates identity? What if doing the thing again and again is what turns a dreamer into a doer, a hopeful into a healer, a wanderer into a warrior? You don't need to change your life overnight. You just need to start walking in the direction you want to grow and keep walking. Because direction, not speed, determines destination, and intention, without repetition, is just a wish. So today, begin with something small, something honest, something you can do, not once but again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, because that is who you are becoming, not in some distant future, but right now, in the ordinary sacredness of your daily life.
We are told from a young age that freedom is the ability to do whatever we want, whenever we want. To sleep when we feel like it, to eat what we crave, to scroll endlessly, to say yes to pleasure and no to pressure. But that kind of freedom doesn't last. It feels good for a moment, but it leaves us hollow. Because real freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the presence of strength. And that kind of freedom is earned. There's a paradox we all face at some point. The more we chase comfort, the less free we become. The more we say yes to every urge, every impulse, every shortcut, the more life begins to quietly slip out of our hands. Ease on its own is a trap that looks like paradise. It whispers you deserve to rest, to delay, to indulge, and sometimes you do. But when ease becomes the compass instead of the rest stop, you begin to drift slowly, softly away from your own power. Freedom doesn't come from doing what's easy. It comes from having the strength to choose what's right, even when it's hard. True freedom is waking up with a clear mind, because you honored your priorities the day before. It's the ability to say no to what feels good now because you've said yes to something greater. It's showing up for the life you want, even when no one is watching. And that's the thing most people forget. Discipline creates options. Ease left unchecked takes them away. A person who has never trained their body becomes a prisoner in it. A person who has never trained their attention becomes a prisoner of distraction. A person who avoids responsibility becomes a prisoner of circumstance. But someone who has earned their choices, who has walked through discomfort, delay, discipline, has access to a kind of freedom that cannot be bought or borrowed. It is the freedom to think clearly, to act deliberately, to live on purpose. You see it in the artist who rises early, not because it's easy, but because the work calls. You see it in the athlete who chooses sweat over sleep because they know what they're building. You see it in the parent, the leader, the quiet soul, who says no to comfort so they can say yes to legacy. This is not about suffering. It's not about punishment or pushing until you break. It's about choosing challenge over chaos, growth over stagnation, alignment over convenience. Because ease can give you a good moment, but earned choices give you a good life. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly proud? Was it when something came effortlessly, or when you pushed through resistance, stayed the course, and did what you said you would do? Pride and peace, the kind that last, come from effort, not from perfection, but from persistence, from the quiet, unglamorous decisions that shape the trajectory of your life. Real freedom isn't loud, it's subtle. It's the soft satisfaction of knowing that you are not owned by your urges, that you have trained yourself to live by principle, not by pressure. So if life feels heavy, unstructured, or out of your control, start here. Make one earned choice today, not because it's easy, but because it's true. And remember, ease may look like freedom at first glance, but it is earned effort, day by day, that unlocks the kind of freedom you can actually live inside. Trust is not something you stumble upon, it's something you build, slowly, quietly, and perhaps most importantly, privately. People often speak about trusting others, about loyalty and betrayal, about who veers our faith and who has lost it. But there's a deeper, quieter form of trust that matters just as much, if not more. Do you trust yourself, not just when things are going well, but when they aren't? Do you trust yourself to follow through, to show up, to carry out what you said you would, even if no one else knows? Self-trust doesn't come from a grand gesture or a moment of heroic discipline. It comes from a single small promise, kept, and then another, and another. That's how the foundation is built, brick by brick, one whisper of integrity at a time. You say, I'll get up at 6 a.m., and then you do. Even once. You say, I won't check my phone first thing, and you honor that, even for a day. You say, I'll drink water before coffee, and you follow through. Tiny things, almost invisible, but not to you. You were watching. You always are. You are listening to the way you treat your own words. And every time you break a promise to yourself, even a tiny one, some part of you learns not to believe what you say. It's not about being hard on yourself, it's about being honest with yourself. Because your mind remembers patterns. It doesn't remember intentions, it remembers repetitions. When you keep the little promises, you become the kind of person who follows through, and that changes everything. Not because the task was impressive, but because the act was aligned. You begin to carry yourself differently, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. Not because you always win, but because you know you'll show up. And that is where real confidence lives. Confidence isn't built in the mirror. It's built in the morning, when the alarm rings and you rise. It's built in the decision to choose presence over distraction, clarity over noise. It's built every time you say, I'll do this, and your actions echo your words. So ask yourself gently, what small promise could I keep today? Not a giant leap, not a total transformation, just one simple commitment, one act of integrity that says, I trust myself enough to follow through. Because the smallest kept promise is never really small. It is a signal, a declaration to the deeper parts of you that says, I am someone who shows up. And once that belief takes root, your entire life begins to shift. You no longer need to rely on motivation, or mood, or the opinions of others. You have something better, self-trust. It becomes your compass, your grounding, your quiet strength in a noisy world. So the next time you feel lost or unsteady, don't look for a dramatic change. Just ask, what is one small promise I can keep to myself today? And then keep it, not because it's easy, not because it's impressive, but because you are worth trusting. And if you forget, if you fall, if you break a promise, start again, not in shame, but in dignity. Because trust is not built in perfection, it's built in the return. In a world that loves firsts, first wins, first milestones, first breakthroughs, we rarely pause to honor what happens after the applause fades. But real success doesn't live in the spotlight, it lives in what you carry quietly, long after the moment has passed. Not in the sprint, but in the sustain. Anyone can shine for a moment. The question is, can you keep showing up when it's no longer new, no longer easy, no longer exciting? Because the truth is, achievement is a spark. Sustainability is a fire, and it's the fire, not the spark, that warms a life. We've been taught to chase outcomes, the big launch, the major weight loss, the promotion, the dream finally realized. And yes, those moments matter, they are beautiful, and worthy of celebration. But here's the soft truth, no one tells you. Success that comes fast and burns bright is also the kind that disappears without warning. The real mastery is in what stays. The habits that remain when motivation is gone. The discipline that holds steady when life doesn't go as planned. The integrity that doesn't fade when no one's watching. That's the kind of success that lasts, that nourishes, that becomes a part of who you are, not just what you did once. Think of a tree. A young one might bloom quickly, full of promise, full of color, but without deep roots, it cannot survive the storm. It may look impressive, but will it last? The strong ones, the oaks, the redwoods, take time to grow beneath the surface, time to become solid, steady, grounded. You don't remember the person who won one, you remember the one who kept showing up, day after day, year after year, becoming a living example of what it means to endure. And this is where the soul of success lives, not in fleeting moments of greatness, but in quiet seasons of commitment. Can you keep writing when the words feel dry? Can you keep serving when no one claps? Can you keep practicing when progress slows? Because when you do, you stop needing the next big win to prove yourself. You already know who you are. Success isn't what you do once, it's what you can return to, again and again, with love, with patience, with purpose. Ask yourself, what parts of my life feel stable? What parts feel temporary, fragile, conditional? Are you building something that only stands in good weather, or something that can stand when the winds rise? And if you haven't sustained it yet, that's okay. This is not about guilt, it's about grace. Start small, start again. Because sustainability is a rhythm, not a race. It's a pattern of showing up for what matters, especially when it stops being easy. You don't need to be extraordinary, you need to be consistent. Even a soft voice, spoken daily, echoes louder than a shout spoken once. Even a humble action, done steadily, outlives a grand gesture done once and forgotten. So measure your success, not by the fireworks, but by the flame. Not by what you reached, but by what you kept. Because that's what shapes you in the end, not what you achieved, but what you honored. Discipline doesn't make headlines. It doesn't walk into the room and demand to be seen. It doesn't announce itself with grand speeches or dramatic gestures. It whispers, it breathes, it returns. In a world that rewards noise, the loudest voices, the flashiest progress, the instant results, discipline feels almost invisible. But if you've ever met someone who lives with quiet strength, you've felt its presence. There's something steady in the way they carry themselves, not rushed, not reactive, just anchored. Because true discipline isn't a performance, it's a way of being, and it doesn't require applause, it only asks for presence. We often think of discipline as something rigid, something strict or harsh, But real discipline isn't about controlling yourself into submission. It's about inviting yourself into alignment. It's the practice of showing up for who you want to become, even when you're not yet there. Especially when you're not yet there, that takes courage, not the kind that leaps, but the kind that stays. The kind that chooses progress over pride, stillness over noise, consistency over intensity. Ask yourself this: who are you when no one is watching? When no one is keeping score? When the mood isn't right? When the work is mundane and the reward feels far away? Discipline is what answers that question. And it always answers with love, not punishment. Because what else would you call it? When someone wakes up early to write, even when the words don't come. When someone turns down temptation, not out of guilt, but out of respect for their future. When someone chooses order, not because it's fun, but because it gives life room to breathe. That's not punishment, that's devotion. To keep becoming, not in leaps, but in layers, not in moments, but in motion, day by day, hour by hour, choice by choice. You shape yourself, not in the image of who you think the world wants you to be, but in the deeper vision of who you're quietly becoming. It won't always feel exciting. Some days, it may even feel invisible. But discipline isn't about being seen. It's about being true to your word, to your vision, to your becoming. Because here's the quiet secret. You don't need permission to begin. You only need the courage to continue. And you already have it. You had it the last time you got back up. You had it the last time you chose progress over comfort. You had it the last time you said, not yet, but soon. Discipline isn't the loud moment when everything changes. It's the soft decision to not give up, especially when it would be easier to. That's where becoming lies. Not in talent, not in luck, not in timing, but in the quiet courage to keep becoming, even when no one notices, even when it's hard, even when it's slow, especially when it's slow. So today, be gentle with yourself and firm with your path. You don't have to rush, you don't have to impress. You only have to keep walking, with heart, with honor, with humility. Because that's where your real power lives. Not in how fast you become, but in how faithfully you do.